Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the transformational leadership of Jesus Christ. What exactly do I mean by that? Though, let's have an example. So there's Jesus, he's at the Sermon on the Mount, right? Like the people are like, woo, he's been doing all these great miracles and stuff. Let's follow him. And he goes and he's like, okay, you want bonus content? Here's your bonus content. And he drops like the Beatitudes on them, right? And they're there all day. They're hungry. And so he's like, yeah, no problem. I take care of that. And so, they gather up the loaves and the fish. And it has to be, see here, we're already stepping into it. Why do they just say loaves and fish? Why is it loaves and fish? I'm not a biblical scholar. I would have to look that up. I wish I'd follow Hillary to answer that for me. He seems to always know these. And I get so much from his sermons, but he hasn't spoken to me on this yet. So if I see him tonight at the friary, I may corner him and ask him what the significance of the loaves and fishes was. That, I mean, I know story-wise what the significance is, but what was the significance to the Jewish people? Is that like their form of granola bar and Gatorade? Is that what they were carrying around? I suspect loaves and fish. On one hand, the fish makes sense because, right, it would be dried fish and it'd be easy to travel with, right? On the other hand, it's probably not fresh bread anymore. And I mean, they've been traveling with Jesus for a while. So unless they were able to run into the shops, whatever this kid has, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's why no one else had it. They'd eaten their dried fish because they've been following Jesus and they had no fresh bread. But maybe this kid was from the local town. Like maybe he was working nearby or something. And as he's walking by, he gets drawn into the crowd. And that's why he has food and really nobody else has, or nobody else is willing to share. But the people are hungry and they ask. And this little guy is like, I can do it. I can help others. And that right there is a transformational part of the story. Why is it this little guy who's the only one able and willing to help? And so he goes up with his 7 loaves and fishes. And isn't it like 7 times 70 or something? That's infinity? So the 7 is probably significant as well. And so there's significance in every layer of this story. And like we were talking about the Jewish roots of Mary, there's probably a lot more going on at the Sermon on the Mount than most of us modern scholars know. And if you don't study Old Testament culture, this is one of our problems, right? We don't get it. We aren't getting the significance. And when the Holy Spirit inspired these stories to be written, every little bit had meaning. Like there's stuff we do in YouTube culture even that has meaning that if you're not from our culture and time, you're not getting all those nuances, right? You're not understanding everything. And so, yeah, what is it about every little aspect of that story? I mean, on one hand, Jesus is fulfilling Old Testament prophecies, and Jews watching him would know. They'd be catching up on everything he's saying, how he's fulfilling all the prophecies, how he's fulfilling the law. They're catching up on that, and they're like, yeah, this is it. Because they try and make him their king, and he's like, no, you missed the entire point of the talk, because they're so busy flipping out on what he's saying that it's fulfilling everything. He's checking all the boxes, right? This is it. This is the Messiah. Let's make him our king. We're going to rule again. This is what's happening. But they're so... On one hand, they're getting it on a much deeper level than us. And on the other hand, he's like, they're not hearing it. What I want them to do, I want to transform them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they have a king. Because remember the Old Testament, they didn't originally have kings either. And God gave it to them because they begged for it. So if you don't remember that, go back and find out how the Jews even got a king. So Jesus is like, no. Oh, how'd you miss that point again, guys, right? And he's like, darn, like, what am I going to do to make you guys realize it's not that kind of king. It's not an earthly king. My kingdom is not of this earth. How many times is he going to say that? He's trying to transform them. And I hope to make some videos on the Franciscan idea of servant leadership. Now, you've probably heard of it. There's some business models out there, right? Robert Greenleaf wrote a book about a lot of things about this. And it started out, he read, I'm going to get it right, Is it Herman Hesse, The Journey to the East? And that book is about a journey. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to ruin it for you. But both Herman Hesse and Robert Greenleaf were what you might call seekers. They weren't really into any one tradition, and they kind of moved between them because they were looking for the truth. So there can be a lot of Asian imagery in there because they were exploring so many different things. And so some people completely reject it because of that idea. But in my reading to the end of the book, I think that's shed by the end of the book, because they're really sharing their journey, even though it's a story. And obviously he didn't live that story, but you're still on his journey. And that's kind of, are you seeing what I'm saying here? So sometimes you tell somebody's story without telling their story, but you're telling a story that's going to transform people. I don't know that I'm making sense. But think of all the parables Jesus came. He didn't come down. From heaven with 2 new tablets and tell us exactly what to do. He didn't come down with all the laws and stuff. He's like, you guys are better than that. Also, we did that and it didn't work out so great. And you got so ritualistic. You got so caught up in those rules. First, you had to have the rules because you weren't willing to listen. So I had to give you the rules like little children so that you could follow. Do this, 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 and this. Don't do this, that, right? And he's like, but then I thought you would grow and understand why the rules were there, and then you wouldn't need the rules. You'd be adults and you'd figure it out for yourselves, but you didn't. And so this time I'm going to tell you stories, and I'm going to tell you stories from your time and day so that you can relate to them. And hopefully, if you're really listening, if you're not just thinking, oh, so if somebody gives me some money, I should go and use it, not just store it in a bank. I should try and invest it in others. Okay, I'm going to go do that. And you literally go do that and nothing else. Because it's not just about investing money in banks. It's about investing your talents in others, seeking out that talent in others. You see somebody that's really good at something and they think they're really crappy at it, so they're not pursuing it and they're not offering that to others. And you're like, oh my gosh, but you're so good at that. You need to tell them. Sometimes they don't know. You need to invest your time in others. Maybe they just have a raw talent and they need it developed. So maybe you can help find them a mentor or, an educational course that would help them develop that further, or even just some ways to practice it. They'll get there, right? And then they'll be able to bless others with that talent. That is transformational or servant leadership. You're literally a servant, but you're not a servant to the point where you're always going to do the work. That's not the point of it. It's to help others mature. So you're seeing something in them that they don't see yet. And it's tricky, right? You're trying to use dialogue. You're trying to use stories. You're trying to model behavior. And sometimes, you outright give them a book. Here, read this. You got to try lots of different ways because everybody learns in different ways. So you got to find the right way that works for them, but also to help them really see themselves as a delight a child of God, a delight to the Father. And so first they have to get that confidence, and then they have to say, yeah, I do have this talent, and this talent was given to me to bless others. And I'm going to go bless others with that. And it may not end up being like a paid job. It might be something you do for volunteering, for fun, but there's usually something you can do to bless others. And it can be something crazy, crazy simple. I have this weird skill, talent, habit. I don't know. It happened to me even since I was a kid. I'd hear the little guy. It's gotten weird at times as an adult. Like I take my kids in Pennsylvania, they have a farm show, not a state fair. So it's in the winter and in this huge indoor complex of buildings. And I'd even be there with my young son and we're running around doing our thing, and lost children and lost people come up to me and ask for help. And I don't mean like occasionally. I mean, like I can be there for 5 hours and have 5-6 people come up and ask me. If I go to the state fair here in Maryland, lost children suddenly appear at my side and I help them get to a policeman. Now, this farm show is not normally lost children in that sense, but they normally know where they need to go, don't know how to get there, and I just help them find it. When it's lost children, I help them find the police. Like, it's bizarre how often it happens to me that complete strangers, when there's hundreds of other people around, will come up to me and ask me to help them find their way or find something that was lost. And somehow it works out. And that's one of the reasons I love that I ended up at the Shrine of St. Anthony, because I don't know. What is he asking me? What is he helping me develop? And I'm trying to do that. And part of it is dialogue and listening to people. A couple minutes ago, I heard this weird noise over at my side, and I couldn't figure out what it is because the animal in that tank that's not a normal noise. And I went over and, I'll say his water dish. I'll be kind and say water dish. His dish of goo was actually quite dry. And I was like, oh my gosh, when did that happen? And I filled it up and the noise has stopped. So apparently that's what he needed. So just stuff like that. So that is a weird thing that I have, that people who need to be heard, because sometimes it's people like in a class I'm in, and they say something and I'm like, that's really odd what they said. It doesn't fit. And I ask and they're completely lost in the content, or they don't know how to work the computer system or something. And I was always able to help them. So that's a weird thing that I have. And I try and use it to bless others. So I have to go out of my house, which is out of my comfort zone, right? And I have to go to these events. And yeah, I end up helping people with very weird things sometimes. But I'm always willing to look for that solution. And that's my thing. But everybody has a thing. Everybody has a charism, some God-given gift that he gave you to bless others with. And how do you find that? So Jesus's gift was to help all of us find our charisms, but not just that, to explain the Old Testament, to explain God, to bring us to the Father in a way that we hadn't done before. And that way was relationship, right? So that's what he's giving us. He's giving us building a relationship with us so we know we can go to him anytime, anywhere, like whatever. Between him and the Holy Spirit, we're covered. And when we're ready to fall on our knees, the Father is there to catch us. So Jesus is like, well, you didn't understand this way. Didn't understand God's power and majesty. You didn't understand it when he gave you rules, right? You didn't understand this or that. So let me sit with you. Let me listen to you and see what you need. And yeah, he could have totally done that from heaven, but we needed him to come down. It wasn't that really, he came down out of great love for us. And that was his need, was to help us, because you see a kid struggling and sometimes you just want to sit there and be like, okay, and just sit with them for a little bit. And when they're ready to tell you what they need, they're going to tell you, right? They're going to explain it the best way they can, and you need to really listen. And sometimes you need to ask the right kinds of questions to draw it out of them. Sometimes they don't have words. And maybe at this point in time, Israel had been oppressed so many times, and they'd gotten it wrong so many times. So many times they got it beautiful and right and gorgeous. And then, you know how it is. We fall into complacency and we lose it again, and you just can't always find your way back on your own. So Jesus is like, come on, I'm going to sit here with you until we get it right. And honestly, for me, what's been opening my eyes to this even more deeply is that book I told you about, the 33 Days to Greater Glory, Consecration to God the Father through Jesus. It's by Father Michael Gately. He's not really suggesting you start it yet because he wants you to consecrate on Divine Mercy Sunday, so you wouldn't be starting yet. So you're lucky. I couldn't wait, and I jumped in. And this book, it's been changing the way I look at a lot of these stories in the New Testament. And wow, it's like I knew that story. I've studied that story. I looked at this angle, I looked at that angle, and I missed something huge from it. And it's just beautiful. So I encourage you, friends, to get out there. Can you imagine if it was modern times, Sermon on the Mount, people would have just been taking selfies. So this would have taken even longer. And we do that sometimes. Even when we go on retreats, we tend to take selfies, right? With our friends and at different locations that were beautiful. I have tons of pictures of Malvern in Pennsylvania because I love that retreat site. And I'm always taking pictures when I'm there and taking pictures with my friends. And I need to stop for a minute and just spend that time, sit there with Jesus and really listen to what he has to say and what he's trying to explain to me. That's it. So take time to listen. That's it, friends. Take time to listen this Lent. God bless you.